Good morning, everyone. I'm leaving on, I guess, a vacation. I'm going to a wedding in Korea tomorrow morning, and I want the last video that I put out here for you guys before I leave for a week to be something that is a useful reference point for you guys to look back at, kind of consolidate what I've been doing in Discord and on stream, looking at people's POBs, helping them out. Just try to get a nice, like, shotgun approach of all different things that I look for when I look at your guys' POBs, things that you want to consider, and how you can upgrade your builds and make sure that you have a really good time. So what I did here is I actually have 4 different POBs that we're going to go over that seem to have a couple different problems. Some are offensive, some are defensive, some are just not knowing where to take the build next. And we're just going to go down the line trying to address those issues, things that I look out for, things that you can look for when you look at your own POB and how you can upgrade your build. So basically the order of operations when I look at a POB is we look at our resists, we make sure that those are all capped out. Really the baseline of Chaos Res in Path of Exile in 2023, 50% is like bare minimum to me. Like you can get away with maybe 20, 30-ish when you're in early maps, but grab those amethyst rings, do everything that you can to cap that res ASAP. It's really, really important. Most of the POBs that we look at today are not going to have capped chaos res. Can't emphasize enough how important that is. Next thing that I look at is the amount of life that is on your character. General rule of thumb that I have talked about, you should have about 3,000 life around when you kill Kitava getting into white maps. You should have about 3,500 to 4,000 getting into yellow maps, and then 4,500 plus when you're in late red maps. Now that is a general rule of thumb. You could definitely be playing some sort of Pathfinder with full fizz damage conversion, crazy stuff, and have 1,000 life and be immortal, right? Totally understand that. But for like a baseline league starter type of scenario, it's really important to just try to get as much life as possible. So when you're looking at your gear, what you're going to want to do is just don't wear gear that doesn't have good life on it. That's my #1 priority, is just life and res. Ignore everything else, reject damage, embrace life. So definitely going to be looking at the life. I'm going to try to correlate that with the level of your character. So if your character is like level 80, 3,500 to 4,000 life is going to be pretty good. But if your character is like level 93, 95, I'm really going to be expecting 4,500 plus life. After that, I will be looking at your EHP. My current character, as you can see, is pretty good. This is with a Mortal Call on. Even without a Mortal Call, I'm looking at 69 EHP and 12k Fizz max hit. And to me, that's a pretty comfortable amount to allow you to do most of the content in the game. This build does Ubers very, very easily at this setup. So basically does everything that you need to in the game. And then after that, we're just going to be looking at the damage. We're going to be looking at the configurations as well. If we go over here to configuration, going to make sure that you have it all set up properly. Make sure that you have Pinnacle Boss selected. Make sure that there's nothing missing or nothing fuzzy. Making sure that you're not typing in, 40% shock or something and faking the amount of damage that you're able to do. Then after that, do a quick little glance at your gear. Make sure that everything is looking pretty good. Making sure that, you don't have T7 life on something. Really easy hits. Make sure that you're not wearing really bad items. Like a big thing that you can just do here, if you don't know, is you can just do any slot that you're looking for. You can do sort by DPS, and POB will just tell you items that make you do more damage. Thing that I like to do is in the build guide, I recommend a Searing Touch. Searing Touch is just very, very good. I only lose 7% damage by using a Searing Touch. It's a great baseline way to get off the ground with your damage. We're probably going to be seeing some weapons here that people are equipping that are worse than a 5 Chaos Staff. So we got to be careful about that as well. And then after that is we want to look at your gems. Make sure that your primary gems are level 21 at least. #1 thing on like day 2 of the league is buy 21 0 gems. Even for a meta skill, you can buy those for about 20 chaos or so. That is a gigantic leap forward in your damage. Emphasized a lot in the build guide is Fire Trap specifically scales damage better than almost any other skill in the game for gem level. So as we can see, I get 2 million more DPS just by getting 1 more gem level on my character right here. So that's actually probably my #1 priority for damage at the moment. Anyway, without further ado, this is just the baseline for what we're looking for. Also, yeah, max spell suppression, making sure that your armor and evasion are respectable. They have good numbers that matter. Yeah, let's get into it. And the names have been scrubbed from the requests here. I took all of these from the build discussion channel in the Discord. There are plenty of wonderful folks in there, especially while I'm gone over the next week. You can join the Discord, put your POB in there. You don't need just me to look at it. So the first one, I tried to follow Sub's guide, but I don't have access to some of the options. Beast crafts mainly. So first thing that I would say there is Wild Bristle Matron. That is the one Beastcraft that I recommend. It is more expensive right now. If you're an SSF, I also understand. I asked here before and I got some good help, but I'm still lost. So I'll see what I can do for you. Other thing that I forgot to mention is allocating where your skill points are. Efficient usage of skill points is very, very important. And yeah, that's actually the first thing that's jumping out to me right here. Understanding how valuable your passive tree is in your character. Literal red flags right off the bat. We got negative chaos res right here. We got dangling points right here. This is a point leading to nowhere. We see redundant passive points right here that are being used for no good reason. And then the big thing that I always want to emphasize is jewels are very, very, very important. If you think on average a jewel is 2 to 3 points on your passive tree, think of what you can get. You can get 7% life. You can get 30, 40% damage. You can get 20% res. That's always a really big red flag to me is we got 2 passive points right here. We got 2 passive points right here. We got 1 passive point down here. That's a lot of value for your build that you're missing. These redundant points right here, these are doing absolutely nothing for you. In the build guide, I do recommend not taking these 3 passive points right here. 4,100 life, pretty decent, but now I'm seeing 3% evasion. You basically have 0 evasion, as well as only 70% spell suppression and 6k armor. Now, if we take a look, let me turn on your flasks. Those were off. So 5,800 evasion, 12k armor. This build doesn't get a lot of armor. 12k in armor is decent, but that evasion number is very, very low. I do recommend running Grace, which I am assuming that you're not running right now. Lower your level of clarity and vitality. Get that Grace in there. And if you take a look, if we do this, your EHP goes up significantly. You're going to be hit by 30% fewer attacks. The best defense is not getting hit. Other thing here is we're seeing singularities. If we just look at Searing Touch, all you have to do is type it in. Searing Touch, if we just mouse over that, gives you 26% increased damage. And that's just with average rolls. If we go for good rolls, at this current state in the league, it's a very, very cheap item. 33% increased damage by just going from that. So from 1.3 million to 1.7 million DPS, which even at these low levels is going to be pretty significant. And then after that, just a quick little perusal of your gear here. We are seeing very low values of lots of stuff. The most important thing really, like you have crafted armor here on instead of life as well. It's a local amount of armor that's giving you almost nothing. You know, you're going from like 260 armor to 330, something like that. It's not really contributing to your defense. Just baseline, you can use Essences of Greed, guarantee like, I think it's like 120 life. Recognizing what's really bad on the gear, just trying to level that up. You can go to ROG, you can use Essences, Fossils, pick things up off the ground. That's going to be the important thing for leveling up your character. Next up, I would just go for Eldritch Implicits, particularly on the gloves. The biggest thing in the build guide, right, is you want to get the Eldritch Implicits for exposure, and then you can use an Eye of Malice, which is a 1 chaos helmet right now. This gives you another 24% increased damage. Just switching to an Eye of Malice right here. Really just with a Searing Touch and Eye of Malice, we have doubled your damage. You know, most important thing is just looking for the cheap, easy stuff that you can get in the build. Go for Amethyst Rings, try to get those cheap items. Always check those implicits for those Eldritch Implicits. You did a good job on these pair of gloves. These are totally acceptable. But yeah, that's that on the first one. All right, second one. I seem to have low DPS and I can't figure out why. I tried to change some defensive gems, but now I'm having mana issues. All right, so I'm going to assume off the bat here that you are swapping your auras for bossing or whatever. So I'm going to turn this Grace off. Grace does very little for most bosses anyway. So we're going to turn that off. We got Malevolence here. You are at 1.4 million DPS. I'm going to go straight to checking the gem levels. You have level 20 Fire Trap. So this is important to pay attention to is which gems you use, understanding the mechanics of the build. So that's what I'm going to focus on here with this build. Number one thing, buy level 21 Zero Fire Trap. That's like 15 chaos right now at time of recording. This will give you 15% more damage. Second thing with that is Ignite Proliferation does not really work with the build. The most important thing to know is that Fire Trap, the way that we scale it is we are kind of pseudo double dipping. We are going for both an Ignite as well as the Burning Ground effect. Ignite Proliferation only works for Ignites. This is a very inefficient gem to use, and all you have to do, click Include in Full DPS, make sure you have Fire Trap selected right here, and the drop down will tell you what the best gem to use is. You are ignoring the number one damaging gem that you can have in this build, which is Trap and Mind damage. This will give you 34% increased damage, just like this. Thing to be aware of, though, is Cruelty doesn't really work for traps. You would need a different skill to give yourself the Cruelty buff. You know, you can't always rely on it. That alone is already a really big increase in your DPS. So yeah, level 21 Fire Trap and Trap and Mind damage. That's the big thing I recommend there. And then looking at your weapons here, they are pretty rough. This one, you could definitely craft this up to be a little bit better. And this one is very bad. Frankly, there is almost no damage on here. The lightning damage to spells is okay, right? We can use any with the Shaper of Flames for igniting. Besides your crafted fire damage, it's basically contributing literally 0 to your damage. As always, we go to Searing Touch right here. Take a look at that, go for good rolls, and we can see that you can get 12% increased damage just with the Searing Touch alone. Now, this is not ideal, right? Since you already have a good scepter, this one is pretty bad, but imagine if you had 2 good scepters. You can go to the drop down right here. Take a look, you know, you could get 20% increased damage with just an additional good scepter. So that's really what I would recommend is just try to replace that other scepter. It's pretty darn bad. Pay attention to your gem levels and your gem quality. Your elemental weakness is 20 and 0. Can get more damage by leveling that up. Elemental weakness gets more curse effect as you get quality on it. Flammability does not. It has ignite duration. So you actually want to find an anomalous flammability and level that up to 2020. And that'll give you some more damage as well. I have been seeing this a lot. People do not understand how cast when damage taken works. Cast when damage taken takes more damage to trigger as it levels up. Very, very importantly, in my version of the build is I have a level 1 cast when damage taken and level 3 Immortal Call. They have to be pretty close to the level. There's a required gem level for triggering a skill off of cast when damage taken. As you can see, it takes 3,200 damage to trigger cast when damage taken. You're already almost dead. That's why what we want to do is actually just use a level 1 cast when damage taken, which will trigger after 500 damage, and then with a level 3 Immortal Call. And you can see, because we have duration on this build, the Immortal Call will last 2 seconds. The basic idea is you want your Immortal Call to go off so you take less damage for the next 2 seconds, and you are able to get out of danger and recover your life. You do not want Immortal Call to trigger after you've taken almost 4,000 damage and you're almost dead. And that's the thing that I've seen a lot of newer players not paying attention to. Besides that, it's just time to upgrade your gear, right? This is your day 2 body armor, right? That's like a 10 chaos body armor, just a corrupted 6 link. Time to buy a non-corrupted 6 link, essence crafted, get good implicits on there. You can do all of that for just a few dozen chaos. Very, very easy, cheap upgrades like that. Basically, what I do every morning is when I log on, I will just kind of mouse over my gear, think about what I want to upgrade for the day, what I want to farm for. Try to find your weakest items that have low tiers of life, don't have implicits on them yet. Just think about ways that you can get to those upgrades. We got you about 30 to 50% increased damage with those little changes right there. I think the most important thing is to not be scared of clicking these drop downs, understanding how you can just mouse over things. And it's not Diablo 4. It doesn't directly give you, green number without configuration, but it does get pretty close if you're not afraid to experiment. Open up POB, start clicking drop downs, see, hey, if I have 2 of the same weapon, is that an upgrade? It'll tell you all those things. Just don't be afraid to experiment. Number 3, I'm starting to hit a wall on red maps, and I'm not really sure what I need to upgrade next. And you'll kind of see why I don't like to do this too much on stream. It's a lot of the same stuff. So hopefully kind of pointing out these specific things can be helpful. And no matter where your build is, you can kind of just review this. All right, so first thing off the bat is inefficient point right here. We want to do this, drop these 3 points so that this gives you 2 more passive points back. Chaos res, first thing that's really jumping out at me. You're a negative 36 chaos res in red maps. At a certain point, there are just these gaping holes in the build that you just missed some fundamentals, really. Like I said, I really prefer something like 4,500 life if you're getting into red maps. 4,000 is your absolute baseline, I think. So let's get the configuration going right here. So Pinnacle Boss, Frenzy Charges. We want to do Convergence on, Fire Damage, Burning, Ignited, Chilled, Shock. Those are always active, basically, because we have Skitterbot. Exposed to Fire. How are they doing exposure right now? Looks like they still have Wave of Conviction. We'll get to that in a second. And then Covered in Ash, assuming that they have Infernal Cry. All right, very good. So as we can see, 2.2 million DPS. That should feel okay as you're mapping. So yeah, negative 36 Chaos Res. We have 7,000 armor, which is low. 7,000 evasion, which is very low. 3,700 life, which is moderately low. Biggest thing that I strongly advise is if you're going to use Eye of Malice, you basically need the exposure on hit glove implicit from Eater of Worlds. You can use any tier. You can just use the cheap lesser ones. Eye of Malice will increase the resistance in either direction. So if it's 10 res, it'll go to 15. But if the monster is at negative 10 res, it'll go to negative 15. So what that means is if you're just frost blinking around, that's your main way that you're clearing. And if you're not doing Wave of Conviction and cursing on every single monster, they are actually taking less damage because of Eye of Malice, not more. So you're probably doing very, very little damage as you're clearing. That's like priority number 1. You did not craft these gloves with Essence of Delirium, so you're missing 30% damage on your Frostblink right here. You have some pretty poorly rolled items that don't really have the right implicits, have very low life on them. If you're gonna craft upgrades, you gotta go a little bit harder than that. Don't have Whispers of Doom yet. I probably wouldn't use Eye of Malice until you have 2 curses. I understand kind of just playing and going forward. Very strongly encourage you not to be scared of crafting upgrades, finding better gear. What I really like to do is every time I boot up the game, just kind of mouse over my gear, understand like what my goal is for the day, what I want to upgrade, find your really weak items. Like for example, with my build that is pretty darn well put together at this point, I will still first thing in the morning when I boot up the game, take a look here, like I got a tier 3 dexterity right here. I am relying on that to cap my spell suppression, so really hard to replace, but it's a thing that's in the back of my head. This amulet, the prefixes are pretty darn bad. I don't need that max mana and reduced mana cost of skills. Do I want to today try to go for +1 fire gems? That's a thing that's kind of in the back of my head. This shield is very, very mediocre. Lots of tier 2, tier 3, and a random tier 4 on there. This is something that I could upgrade over time. Not like a lot of effort to upgrade this thing over time. These boots have crafted life. Maybe that's something I could upgrade, and so on and so forth. Even though I have a lot of really good gear, I still try to keep it in the back of my mind, the stuff that I'm going for to upgrade, and really hone in and try to think about Like find those weak mods on your gear. Think about how you can upgrade them. For example, like when I see this tier 4 cold res that's bottom rolled, I know that I can go to Hoarder Crafting Station, change cold to fire, and then fire back to cold. And then I can use that as like a cheap divine to try to get to 35 cold res right there. And similarly with the POB that we're looking at, just try to go over, find these like really, really weak items, try to do some research on how you would upgrade them, right? This is a pair of boots that I would leave on the ground. I would literally never equip these. Not trying to go too hard, but there's no movement speed. There's only 18 life. These are like Act 1 boots at the best, right? The lowest tier life that you can get basically, okay res and no movement speed. I understand, you know, this is clearly a very new player, but it's very worth understanding like what the item can do, where you can go from there. Lean into learning how to craft, you know, watch my crafting guide to learn those fundamentals and just see where all of the weak items are. Your ability to get into the end game can far outstrip your knowledge of the game. And then you're fighting these like really hard essence mods and you're bumping up against like conquerors and guardians and you don't even know how to get movement speed on your boots. It's a chicken and the egg type of problem because it is important to have a build that people can just play and have fun. That is the point of the game, right? And then without further ado, the last one. What can I change here? I feel a bit squishy. And I chose this one on purpose because looking at the Pobbin preview, I saw 3,000 life, I saw 4 chaos res, I saw 18 spell suppression. With the flasks on, we're seeing 7,000 armor, 16,000 evasion. All of those numbers are kind of lower than they should be. Most important thing, spell suppression, really, you want to get to like 90% with lucky. That will give you 99%, or you just want to hit that 100% breakpoint. So you effectively have like 0 spell suppression at this point. So right off the bat, we're seeing very inefficient use of points, right? The build guide does recommend dropping these dangler points as soon as you get to a little bit later game. Spell damage, you want to drop this ASAP. Spell damage does nothing for the build effectively, so we want to drop that. That gives you 2 more passive points. You do want to drop practical application ASAP. You can just use a small jewel to get your dex requirement up or craft it on gear. This is 2 more points right here that you just don't need at all. So we already have 2, 4, 6, 8 passive points that you had allocated that were unnecessary. Here's 9. We have another dangler right here. Looks like you're taking this to get your strength requirement up. We can fix all of that with a single basic jewel socket that will just give you strength and dex. And so we still have 6 more passive points to spend. Very important. The whole reason we're going down here is to get Magebane. So make sure you take that. You're skipping the most important node to take these little small danglers. We're down to 4. Another one right here, we're down to 2. And these last 2 points, we'll just put another one of these in. So you had 3,000 life. This gets you to 3,200. We just got you a lot more percentage life on the tree. So now I'm concerned that there is no life on your gear. And so I bet you if we take a look at your items, you have very, very low life on your gear. Assuming that this isn't corrupted, right? 27 life on a body armor. That's just, I understand that you're going for res, but really you shouldn't be equipping something that has this low life like ever. Like this is Act 1, Act 2 maybe, right? For example, all you got to do is you go to your essences right here. If you got essence on the tree, body armor, 126 max life. If you just craft this on just a random, buy a corrupted 6 link, 126 life, craft a new helmet for 106, and then any other slot you can get, 90 to 96 on gloves, boots, and helmet. Easy deafening essences of greed. As you can see, they're very cheap, 92 per divine. They're 2 chaos each. I'm assuming that your weapons are very, very bad, like 10% less global damage. That is very, very bad. And then the actual item itself has 0 damage. As always, we put in Searing Touch. Searing Touch, look at that, 55% more damage. If we just put on a bottom rolled Searing Touch, goes up to 65% on a top rolled. Gigantic damage boost. That's a very severe miss. You are actually equipping an item that makes you do less damage for your weapon. Same thing here, right? Eye of Malice, you're using this without the glove enchant. You craft a dexterity on there just to try to get your dex requirements up, I understand. But yeah, there's no life on your gloves. Actually, most of your items here, right? You got +1 fire skill gems, but everything else is kind of bad. Craft life on there. At least these boots have movement speed. And then if we look at your gems right here, level 19, you can buy a 21-0 for like 1520 chaos right now. That'll give you even more damage, 3.1 million DPS. Like I said earlier, like this is kind of the problem is this person hit level 82. They were at 1.5 million DPS. They're talking about getting into red maps. They don't understand about getting life on their gear or anything like that. It's a difficult problem with how complex this game is and like how do we actually distill all of the knowledge in a build guide. Looking at this build, right? Just getting a level 21 fire trap, grabbing a Searing Touch. We have this build that has gear like this, still doing 3.1 million DPS. The other thing that I would say is white flasks. Be very careful about your flasks. You want your flasks to last as long as possible. You want to quality those up with glass blowers. This flask only lasts 3.4 seconds. where if we look at my Granite Flask, it lasts 7.2. Since it consumes 30 charges on use, probably not killing 30 monsters every 3 seconds, so that duration can go a very long way. I really encourage you to look for, especially the prefixes on your flask, that will give you charge recovery, reduced charges per use, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to get ready for a short stream, and then I'm going to finish packing. And I'm going to be going to a wedding in Korea this weekend. It's going to be really fun. I might stream 1 or 2 days at my friend's apartment. My friend that actually got me to start playing PoE is my friend whose wedding I'm going to in Korea. So he will totally understand streaming from his apartment a little bit. But yeah, that's it for me. Hope you guys are having a great 321 Crucible League so far. And see you guys soon. Goodbye.